The rain came down in a steady whisper that evening, washing the city in silver. Pulled at the cuffs of his worn-out shirt, trying to make it look a little more presentable as he stood outside the glittering restaurant. He had never stepped into a place like this before. Everything about it, polished glass doors, golden lights, expensive cars parked outside, reminded him of the difference between his world and theirs. He was just a mechanic, someone who smelled of grease and engines, not perfumes and power. His best friend had convinced him to go on this blind date. Maybe your life will change, bro, he had said. Wasn't sure he believed in that, but something inside him hoped for a miracle. The moment he entered, the warmth of the place wrapped around him. Soft music floated in the air, and laughter echoed from tables filled with well-dressed people. Ian felt small in his cheap shoes and thrifted jacket, but he forced his shoulders straight and scanned the room. Then he saw her. A young woman sat alone in the far corner, her long black hair cascading down her shoulders. There was a quiet grace about her, something fragile yet strong. Her hands rested gently on the wheels of her chair, and her eyes seemed lost in thought. Heart skipped. Maybe this was her. He walked over nervously, his heartbeat louder than the music. Hi, he said softly. She lifted her head slowly, surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone, she replied, her voice calm and clear. His face flushed. He had sat at the wrong table. But instead of walking away, something in her gaze held him there, like a story waiting to be written. Zara Malik had long grown used to the stairs. Everywhere she went, people saw her wheelchair before they saw her face. Some looked away in pity, some in discomfort, and a few pretended not to notice at all. But this stranger sitting in front of her, the one with nervous eyes and rough hands, looked at her like she was just a woman, not a fragile thing to be protected. It startled her more than she wanted to admit. Sat stiffly, unsure of whether to leave or stay. I'm really sorry, he blurted out. I think I sat at the wrong table. Zara tilted her head slightly, a soft smile curving her lips. Then maybe it's a good mistake. She surprised herself by saying that. For so long, her world had been quiet, predictable, and painfully lonely. Tonight, something felt different. They began talking slowly, like two strangers feeling their way through darkness toward a shared light. He told her he worked at a small garage and had a habit of fixing things with his hands. She spoke of books, of how she loved stories because they allowed her to walk in places her legs couldn't take her anymore. When she mentioned the accident, the night a drunk driver changed everything, her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed strong. Everyone saw what I lost, she said quietly, but no one ever asked what I still had. Didn't give her pity. He leaned forward and said gently, then they're not looking right. For the first time in a long time, Zara felt warmth, not from comfort or charity, but from being truly seen. As the night deepened, their conversation flowed effortlessly. What had started as a wrong table now felt like exactly the right place to be. The next morning, Zara couldn't stop replaying the night in her mind. It had been years since she'd felt that lightness, that spark. A stranger had accidentally sat at her table, but in those few hours, he had seen her in a way no one else ever had. She held her phone in her lap, hesitating, then finally sent a message through the restaurant's reservation system, an invitation for him to meet her again. She wasn't sure if he'd say yes, but part of her hoped he would. Across the city, was at his garage, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag when his phone buzzed. His heart thudded as he read the message. She wanted to see him again. But just as a smile broke on his face, his friend Amir walked in and laughed. You really think a CEO's daughter will end up with a mechanic? Frowned. What are you talking about? Amir explained everything. The woman had met was Zara Malik, daughter of one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. The real blind date had been waiting at another table all along. You're way out of her world, bro. Walk away before you get burned. But couldn't. Something about Zara had reached deep into him. So when she asked to meet, he went. Their second meeting felt even easier than the first, filled with shy smiles and unspoken understanding. But their growing closeness didn't stay hidden for long. Mr. Malik found out. His arrival at the restaurant was like a storm. A mechanic. He spat, his voice sharp. My daughter will not disgrace this family. Zara's eyes filled with pain. stood, hands clenched but voice calm. Sir, I'm not here for your money. I'm here because she matters to me. Zara stopped seeing after that night. She hadn't wanted to, but her father's fury was like a wall she couldn't climb. His words echoed through their cold mansion. You have a future to protect, Zara. That boy will only drag you down. She tried to argue, but the more she spoke, the harder his tone became. In the end, she stayed silent, letting him believe she had given up. But silence didn't mean forgetting. The days that followed were heavy. Zara spent hours in her room, staring at the rain outside, thinking about the way had looked at her. Not with pity, not with fear, but with quiet strength. He had made her laugh again. He had made her feel alive. But now, she was locked back inside a golden cage, where every smile was forced and every breath felt borrowed. 2. Was breaking. In his small garage, the sound of engines was no longer comforting. His friends noticed the distance in his eyes. He tried to bury himself in work, convincing himself it was better this way. But no amount of work could silence the echo of her voice in his mind. Then, one night, Zara overheard her father's phone call. He was arranging her engagement to a wealthy business partner's son, a man she didn't know, a future she didn't choose. Something inside her snapped. For the first time since the accident, she felt a fire burn inside her. She wheeled herself out of the house without looking back. Her heart raced as the city lights blurred past her. When she reached the garage, she saw him covered in oil and sorrow. Tears filled her eyes. You're a fool, she whispered. He looked up, startled. For what? For thinking I'd ever stop loving you. Mr. Malik had built his life on control of his business, his image, and, most of all, his daughter's future. But when he saw Zara standing in front of him with Ayan by her side, something in her eyes made him falter. She wasn't the fragile, broken girl he'd spent years protecting. She was strong, steady, and defiant in the most beautiful way. Father, Zara began, her voice calm but firm. All my life, you've made choices for me. You built walls to keep the world out, but those walls also kept me from living. I love him. And this time, I won't let you decide for me. The room fell silent. Stood beside her, shoulders tense, ready for rejection. Mr. Malik's jaw tightened. He saw the grease-stained hands of a mechanic, a boy who could never match their status. But then, his gaze shifted to Zara's face, glowing not with rebellion, but with courage. He realized he had spent years protecting her body but had never once listened to her heart. Days passed, and silence replaced arguments. Slowly, Mr. Malik began to notice what presence did for Zara. She smiled again. She spoke with strength. The light in her eyes, long buried, had returned. One evening, he visited at his garage. I don't trust easily, he said, voice low. But I can't ignore what my daughter becomes when she's with you. Don't fail her. Months later, under a sky filled with soft lanterns, knelt before Zara, not to save her, but to walk beside her forever. She said yes, tears streaming down her cheeks as the crowd clapped. The blind date that began as a mistake became the beginning of a love strong enough to change even the coldest heart.